have to know teams.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kit Van Wagner, and I'm Director of Operations with Dresser Marine, which is the parent company for Confident Captain and the Professional Captains Association. And welcome to the December Pro Seminar Series. We are here this evening with Dan Somma. This is part of a professional series for captains with licenses less than 200 gross tons. We're the Professional Captains Association supporting these captains. And as part of our professional development, we offer these monthly seminars during the winter months with a host of different topics. So we have some great speakers lined up for entering into 2022. I hope you'll all be able to join us again. And it's my privilege this evening to introduce Dan Somma. Dan and I met in the Florida Keys back in the mid-90s, so we've known each other for quite some time. From afar, I've been impressed to follow his career and his progression through the Coast Guard, achieving the rank of commander, and now he's working in a big role with a lot of responsibility at Marathon, overseeing dock safety and compliance. And I think it's an area that often gets overlooked in safety audits and safety management, risk management. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to take a look at this field this evening. This presentation is being recorded. It will be archived on our YouTube channel. And that link will go out in our next Captain's Dispatch, our newsletter. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. If I could ask everyone just to mute yourself during the presentation, keep note of those questions that you might have for Dan, and we will have a question and answer at the end of the seminar. So I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to put Dan in the spotlight. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, hi. Well, thanks, Kit, for the great intro. And yes, we met in the Florida Keys in the mid-90s, and working on small passenger vessels at Newfound Harbor Marine Institute in Big Pine. It was a great time, and we both got a lot of sea time there, and that was probably the first time where I thought seriously about a career in the Coast Guard, operating small boats and really just enjoying the Keys and the whole lifestyle there. Welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about dock safety and emergency preparedness. I have a few slides to go through, but I hope we have some discussion as well at the end. Definitely have time for questions. What I learned in the Coast Guard and what I've sort of carried through with Marathon is that there's no, it's hard to categorize when it comes to working on the docks or maritime. You have to be able to do multiple things. You have to be able to think as a safety professional, but also as an emergency manager, and also as an environmental professional. So there's three kind of roles that I fill at Marathon. I have to think about all three. You know, we don't want to have anyone get hurt. We want to be ready for emergencies when they happen, and then we also want to protect the environment. So all those things are really important and have to be part of your dock program. A little about me. My formal title is Marine Terminal Compliance Advisor. It's a role that didn't really exist a few years ago when I was hired. I was hired as an emergency preparedness coordinator. So what I do now and what I started doing is a little different. When as emergency preparedness coordinator, I was running drills and exercises for about 80 oil terminals in our midstream business at Marathon. So that's midstream is pipeline, terminals, marine. It's the logistics and storage of product. That's the midstream business. And then I evolved into a more dock-centric role. Right now, I support just over 40 docks in 11 states. And by docks, I mean dock terminals. Some terminals have more than one dock. And so we can be operating in whether it's brown water, blue water, rivers, and I have a slide. I'll show you the map. In a minute. My Coast Guard career was I had a great Coast Guard career. Honestly, I loved every minute of it. I did everything from oil spill response to marine inspection. So I was a barge inspector, tow and vessel inspector, cruise ship inspector, tank vessel inspector. I was on an armed boarding team, so I did port state control and unarmed, and then I also did sea marshal and boarding team member as an armed member as well. That was in the Port of New York and Port of Seattle, and then I did a staff tour in DC. I was in the TWIC and MTSA office. So I traveled around the country in the 05-06 timeframe, promoting the Maritime Transportation Security Act, as well as TWIC card. And so those of you in Maritime know the TWIC card. I had a great experience. I had great leaders and managers there when I was at headquarters, promoting a very difficult program that the marine industry really had to embrace. I got to speak with a lot of mariners, and I learned a lot about industry, and also that the TWIC card fixed some problems but didn't fix everything, and we could have a whole night on TWIC. But and after that experience, I went over to Military Sea Lift Command. So I was Coast Guard liaison officer, working for about 150 non-combatant ships. So those of you in Maritime with licenses and will know Military Sea Lift Command, they're a great employer. And I worked around the world, really. Worked on safety management systems for vessels in the Mediterranean. Also worked on some different Department of Defense command and control platforms and missile defense platforms in the Pacific, and had some really exciting experiences with those programs. Anything that didn't have Navy guns on it was under is under Military Sea Lift Command, if you can think of it that way. And then wound up in the Great Lakes. I was the prevention department head and leading compliance for facilities and vessels on Lake Michigan, and then was promoted to deputy commander. So ran all of those programs plus search and rescue and 23 Coast Guard stations. So that's the picture you see there. Is I'm part of being a search and rescue mission coordinator. You have to learn the assets, and so you got to get out and fly with the pilots. And so I got to do quite a bit of work there with the helicopters and our search and rescue assets on the lake, primarily small boats and the HH-65. Since joining Marathon, though, I've had to straddle both those worlds, prevention and response. So at Marathon had a strong dock safety program. There was a death in 2010, unfortunately, from a person in water situation at off one of our towing vessels at one of our docks, and Marathon began a very robust overhaul of dock safety. By the time I was hired in 2018, there were areas that the company wanted to continue and improve on. So we improved audits, weekly inspections, and now we run rescue drills as well. And all of these are above and beyond what's required by the Coast Guard or OSHA. It's just Marathon policies that are driving it. And also at Marathon, we are very aware of extreme weather around our maritime areas. We have, like I mentioned, we've got dock locations around the country. And as you all are aware, extreme weather is, it's the norm. So that 100-year storm seems to come every year, right? And so every year is hurricane. We're having big hurricanes, big storms. And so the maritime industry has to adjust to that. And Marathon is a very robust effort in this regard. As you can see, so Marathon Logistics and Storage has just over 40 dock locations around the country, and these are a combination of blue water and brown water. So the legacy initial, Marathon headquarters is in Findlay, Ohio, and sort of the legacy business was based around the Ohio River. So Marathon began as a brown water transportation company, oil company, and over the years has grown and acquired other companies, and most recently expanded to the West Coast. And so we now have dock locations in Washington State, in California, in Alaska, Florida, Louisiana, and acquired New York, Buffalo, New York, just 2 years ago, and then our earlier core business was around the Ohio River, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So in a few years ago, Marathon has a continuous improvement program that we use for lots of things. We decided to use it for dock safety. And so we went through a rigorous process of looking at stem to stern all aspects of our dock program. And we went through over 50 documents related to dock safety and visited just about every dock in the company, doing audits and visits and observations. And we looked at the end of this, we decided that we had 3 pillars. We decided that we had a hazard recognition pillar, a prevention, and a response pillar. So from my Coast Guard background, I'm familiar with prevention and response. And we added hazard recognition because the oil companies, and Marathon in particular, does a really good job here with recognizing hazards. So even before you decide on how you're going to prevent an accident, you need to recognize the hazard. And so we color-coded these similar to the Coast Guard's GAR model, green, yellow, red. So green being, this is where we want to be in the hazard rec phase. We want to be observing. We want to be doing training. We want to be constantly thinking about how we can prevent hazards. Then in the yellow, we say, okay, what can we do to prevent? We're going to do engineering controls, installing handrails. Are we going to be looking at our PPE, improving our PPE requirements, or looking at fall protection requirements? And then on the response side, we don't want to have to be here, but we're ready to respond if we have to. So do we have AEDs on the docks ready to go in case we need them? Do people know what to do in a response? And I would say that coming from the Coast Guard to Marathon, I would say that in operations, in marine operations, marine operators and licensed mariners do really well in the green and yellow. And then there's always training though in the red. And I'm not saying that mariners aren't good emergency responders. As a matter of fact, they're excellent emergency responders. But when you're talking about shore-based facilities, you're in a regulatory environment. You need to be able to follow your plans tightly, make all your notifications correctly, and ensure that all parties are aware and are fully notified when they need to be. And that might be a little different than when you're at sea. It's more about saving the ship and taking care of business on the ship. At the dock locations, we want to really emphasize that we are in the community, right? We have neighbors there around us, and we have relationships with our stakeholders, relationships with our customers, relationships with the local responders. So we really work on these areas. One of these responses that a recent one was Hurricane Ida, which came through Louisiana. It actually just missed New Orleans. And there was widespread power outages, refineries and terminals shut down. There were a lot of barge breakaways. This was on the Mississippi River, this photo. And our merchant captains and merchant mariners and dock personnel really had to step up. So you can see here, this was a barge breakaway that hit our Garyville refinery dock. And these are coal barges, freight barges. They're not Marathon property, but this happens on the river. You have these situations where you have to do damage assessment. You have to follow procedures and look at how are we going to get these barges collected and moved. What assistance do we need, whether it's from the Army Corps of Engineers or the Coast Guard? In this scenario, we were the Southern Louisiana pilots were very important in coming out, using their small boats to do surveys of the river bottom, and look at, is it even safe to operate? Can we bring a towing vessel in here to grab these barges, or are there hazards underneath the water? Do we need to do side scan sonar beforehand? So there's a lot of steps that go into responding, and we had to rely on professional captains like yourselves to come in and help us with the sonar, the side scan process, doing survey work, running crews out to towing vessels, out to other barges, and then eventually we had obviously towing capabilities. Towing vessels came and grabbed these barges, got us away from our dock. So being in oil, in energy industry, you never want to be down. You never want to have downtime. So we did lose dock availability here, but the whole port was shut down. So it wasn't like there was a competitive advantage to being open, because we couldn't get any vessels in. But we worked closely with the Coast Guard, regular calls to get the latest and get the port opened as soon as we could. And actually, the captain of the port in New Orleans, I think, did a fantastic job of being very transparent and on all the calls with us to help us have up-to-minute information. So we really rely on those relationships. So that was Ida. That was a recent event. Another one that I like to talk about is Maria, and this was before I joined Marathon. This was during my Coast Guard tour. To give some background, the Coast Guard maintains across the country a group of qualified incident commanders. So I was one of those. And so when you have a big event in the Caribbean, you exhaust the resources there pretty quickly. So people get burnt out. And you bring in somebody like me whose active duty location is in Milwaukee, but I have I was qualified as an incident commander, so I went to San Juan. And here you can see the merchant fleet is really important, and I consider the Comfort, the hospital ship, in that category. Yes, they're a U.S. naval ship, but they're crewed by civilian mariners. So on that ship, you have medical professionals as well as a whole civilian crew of merchant mariners that sailed the Comfort. And while when the Comfort came into port, there was a lot of, so I was there as an incident commander, and Comfort coming to port, we knew that initially it takes a bit of time for the Navy to clear people to actually come on board and get treatment. But it's just that psychological effect of the big hospital ship coming that I think really helped a lot of the people who were suffering. I mean, the island had no power. There was no running water in most locations. There was very little food available. Stores were not open. We often went out into the community, and I was told before coming down to bring cash, which I did. I took a lot of cash with me, more than the government provided, because there was, in order to get, whether it was to get meals, there wasn't enough food. So we would pay for meals as responders. We would pay local people who were making different meals out of their houses or selling out of the back of a car. You could buy a meal. We had, so it was very much like I told Kit earlier, it was like a Survivor episode. It was, you were really just trying to do the basics. And with that, if you look on the left there, that's the fast response cutter that the Coast Guard, these were fairly new in 2017 when this incident occurred. And for those, if you're a ship nerd like I am, a cutter nerd like I am, these were built very exciting platforms for the Coast Guard, because at 154 feet with a 5-day range, you could put a junior officer as a commanding officer of these. So you might have a lieutenant, junior grade, or lieutenant with a small crew of 15 or 20. And if you're a young lieutenant in the Coast Guard, you get assigned one of these cutters. It's very exciting because you get to basically get a lot of operational experience at a young age. And these were fantastic assets during the hurricane, after the hurricane, I should say, because a lot of the work we needed to do was getting supplies distributed around the island. A lot of the roads were knocked down. There wasn't power there. Trees were covering the roadways. So the Coast Guard was relied on to do a lot of humanitarian support. The one Achilles heel of these vessels was a 5-day working range. So they couldn't stay on station as long as they need to, and they did need maintenance at some point, and we had to arrange for all that. But they proved vital during the response and deserve some credit. And this is an incident management team, the typical Coast Guard incident management team that gets deployed. So we came down from Clearwater, Florida in a C-130. Fantastic aircraft. If you are interested in aircraft, that could be a whole nother talk. Coast Guard aircraft. The C-130, I think we're on the C-130J now. First one rolled off the assembly lines in 1954. They are still making them. They're a terrific, affordable, great use of taxpayer money. They can haul cargo, they can haul people, and the Coast Guard has used them for many years and got us down from Clearwater to San Juan. And we landed, as in this picture, as soon as we landed, the National Guard arrived and they provided us an escort out of the airport. There was minimal security and a lot of safety concerns initially, so we were escorted. But a typical Coast Guard team like this has incident management professionals on it, critical incident stress managers. So we dealt a lot with people that were very had been at the end of their rope, literally, because of stress they were dealing with without having power and running water. So we had qualified, trained people to interdict there. We also had translators in this group. And an interesting point, our translators did a great job, but we had to, one of the decisions I made was I requested Puerto Rican translators, not just Spanish speakers, but Spanish speakers that grew up in Puerto Rico, for two reasons. One, Spanish is a little different than other parts of the country. And two, those who had been impacted, who had family members there. So we had Coast Guard members who grew up in Puerto Rico who were concerned about their families. Who better to send back to Puerto Rico to help than somebody who knows the island and can speak the language? So that was something we implemented. And so a lot of lessons there in Maria. It was really a great experience. And then a third one I thought would be appropriate to mention was Deepwater Horizon. I was a shoreline group supervisor and a federal on-scene coordinator. And so every morning I would get up in the helo and look for oil. And then we would know where the oil was located. And then we would dispatch small boats with oil spill response equipment into the oil for cleanup. We also had observer type vessels that we sent out looking for oil. And those were like local licensed mariners that could operate small boats, knew the waters. This is off Grand Isle, Louisiana, which is the southernmost, really the only continuous beach in Louisiana. There's about an 8-mile stretch of beach. And there's some islands just off of that. And you can see the product we were dealing with in this case was kind of a bright red. It had been, if you recall, they were using dispersants at the wellhead. So a lot of the oil was coming in was pretty bright red and orange. You can see like it would heavily stain. So we would note this in the helo and try to get vector response resources into it. And of course, now that I'm working for an oil company, this is not a situation an oil company ever wants to be in. So we do lots of training, lots of planning to make sure we're ready if something like this were to occur again. And that's everything from response planning to drilling with our internal team and also drilling with the Coast Guard. So one thing that I always do if I'm running a drill for Marathon is I always invite the Coast Guard, I invite the state, the EPA, I invite OSHA, I invite, if there's a party that I think could help us be a better responder, I invite them and I get their feedback. And it's a really good way to make sure that your plans and you're ready to go. I have when I was preparing this slide deck, I have a trusted colleague within Marathon who's also from the Coast Guard, and I was talking to him about it, and I said, I really want to talk. I'm on the terminal side. I don't represent the towing vessels, but I said I really want to talk about our marine group because they do such a great job. So looking at marine, and since you're licensed captains, is maritime mobility is key. So being able to move product, if a pipeline is down for some reason, there's a valve closed, or there's some restriction to operation for some reason, we then can shift to marine mode. We can put product in barges, move it on the river. If there was a cyber attack, which actually happened, and not on our equipment, but one happened, and a lot of the transport trucks were tied up moving product because the pipeline wasn't working on the East Coast. We then can move product on the rivers. So we use our towing vessels to do that. And merchant mariners are a key part of that. I mean, we're towing vessel master is a licensed member of the maritime community. So really, really important roles for the merchant mariner, and in moving product and just having, maritime resumption and maritime mobility in our country is just key. And it's one of the things that really makes America a strong country, is we do have terrific maritime industry that can respond and help us move products and people in the times when we need it. So I'm right there, right around checking my watch there, and I see I'm just around the 30-minute mark, which is my plan. So I hope I had some interesting insights for you all at the Professional Captains Association. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear anything.
Dan, thank you so much. This is super insightful and interesting. I have a question. Just as I was watching, you've clearly worked on some really big projects and big undertakings. And I wonder if you could scale down a little bit of advice for small boat captains who want to, uphold those 3 pillars you talked about. So hazard recognition and prevention. What's a good formula for them to approach trying to, keep their safety records high, keep everything, working well, working safely? Do you have any advice for folks who want to do this on a much smaller scale than what you've been involved in?
Right, that's a great question. Yeah, so what we do, so when I got hired at Marathon, I kind of dragged over some best practices that we learned, in the Coast Guard. And so one thing, when I was deputy, I learned during my station visits the importance of the boat check. So all of our Coast Guard boats get a daily boat check, and we don't want to. And I adopted that policy for dock terminals, so dock locations. We don't want to have something that gets pencil whipped. We want to actually have a checklist. Checklists are great, but that's insightful to your operation. And a good example, I think, for this is when I've done marine inspection on lots of small, on subchapter T boats, right, small passenger vessels. If I see a life ring that's decayed, or the line on a throw ring that's decayed, I'm not so much worried about the throw ring as I am the whole process behind that. And that goes for our own docks at Marathon or a small passenger vessel. So if your life jackets are covered in oil and have all the buckles broken and probably don't float, or if they did, they would create a sheen, right? That's not what we're striving for. And so we have to ask, how did we get, how do we get here? What is the system behind this? So, and if we go back, we look at, do we have a system for ordering equipment? Do we even know where we're supposed to order the equipment from? Do we have the right accounting to do that? Are we going to do it by credit card, or we're going to create a bigger account with a supplier so that it's easy to order the right stuff and get the right stuff? A lot of times everybody wants to do the right thing, but they just don't know how to order it, or they're not sure how to do it. And so you have to make that easy. So if you're going to have a checklist, you should have in there, what's the vendor we're going to use? What's the salesperson's phone number? We do online, but me personally, with our systems, we always have a vendor name, a salesperson, point of contact with a phone number that knows our business, that can get us what we need. And especially when you look at like oil response equipment, like boom, it gets confusing quickly as to what you really need. So having like a good sales person that knows your business, and it might cost a little bit more, but it's worth it. So really doing that daily check or weekly check. Maybe you're running a small boat that's not being worked every day prior to operation. And then having an audit program. You remember, the Coast Guard is not your auditor. So so many boats I would go to where just things weren't ready because they felt that the Coast Guard was going to find whatever the Coast Guard found, they would fix. And so you wound up with a work list of 50 items. So when I was an inspector in New York, we came up with like a 5-item rule. Like if once you hit 5 items, you'd say like, hey, I don't want to sit here and write 10 items. Why don't I give you another week? I'll come back. You obviously aren't ready yet. Here's 5 to start with, and I'll come back and finish later. So you don't want to have that situation. You want to have a program where you're ahead of the game and you're inspection ready. So that's really having an internal audit program where either you or and if you don't want to pay for an external auditor, you could do with a neighbor's boat, someone else's equipment, and you swap. So you look at each other's stuff. So those are some items, and then kind of leave the regulate. The Coast Guard will help for sure, but not making them get too far involved in your programs. You want to have everything ready ahead of time, and all their checklists are pretty much published somewhere, and you just have to ask for them or look for them online to see what the key items are.
I think that's so important, that what you mentioned about a rotted ring buoy, it's a symptom of a much deeper problem. So I think that's a really good lens for folks to be thinking through. If gear is out of date or expired or not working, yes, it's a problem that piece of equipment is not ready, but there's a whole chain of events that's led up to that being the case. So thank you for that. That's some great insight there. We had another question from Pam. I see you're there, Pam. Did you want to ask your question directly? She wrote it into the chat, so I can ask it for you, or you want me to do it?
It's in the chat. Sorry, I'm in a restaurant.
No, go ahead. Oh, I'll read it. I'll read it. So it says, thank you for your service. So in catastrophic events like mentioned, how does the U.S. Coast Guard reach out to individuals that are licensed captains on a small scale to help out? I know my application, when I got my 6-pack, asked us if we wanted to be part of an emergency response team. Does the USCG reach out to mariners like us?
Definitely. I think a great example was during Deepwater Horizon, there were a lot of, in southern Louisiana, there were a lot of public meetings that were held, and during those meetings, the ideal situation is you have the local government, parish official or county official present. You have a Coast Guard and then the responsible party at these meetings together, talking to the community about what is being done. And at those meetings, there's websites provided, signups provided for those who want to help or get paid for their efforts. So if you have a vessel that's not working, a fishing vessel, for example, that's not working during a spill, you can sign up for that. I know another example was I actually got a call from a friend who was a licensed mate, and after Irma, and if you remember, Hurricane Irma swept through the Florida Keys and did a lot of damage to the Keys in Florida, and there was definitely a need for towing vessel personnel, that there just weren't enough in the Keys. So we were able to connect him with the Coast Guard sector in Key West and the Coast Guard sector in Miami, which were maintaining lists of mariners that could work. The challenge there was finding lodging for them in the interim. So that is always a problem, and still is a problem today when we have these events. If there's not lodging available, it's hard to get down close. But if you're willing to stay a little bit far away, or maybe sleep in a car one night, usually we can, those things can be worked through. It's definitely not a perfect system, but one thing I've been really impressed with is if you follow Team Rubicon, who I got to know a bit after Hurricane Harvey and Irma. They just do a great job. So you can list your skills. Of course, they're a volunteer group, but that's if you get down, the key is getting to the site. So if you want to just be known and you have your skills listed, I think that's a great organization to look at as well, is signing up with them. You just have to take, you have to have incident command system, I think 100, which is the basic level. And I think a current medical record on file. So there are definitely a few ways to do it. And I imagine FEMA has some better systems as well that have evolved over the last few years.
Great, thank you for that. Team Rubicon is an amazing organization. I've been following them for years. They deal a lot with veterans and helping after massive catastrophic events. So that's a good recommendation. I'd just like to find out if there's anyone else on the live forum here who has a question for Dan. Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. Thank you, Pam, for your question.
Good evening.
Hi there, is this Mike?
It is.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Dan, I appreciate all your help and your advice. It's well worth the time invested. And hey, a couple of questions. Number one, is there any danger or hazard that you've seen from in-water electrocution at your docks from stray electrical power in the water? It's particularly more dangerous in fresh water and brackish water than salt water.
the short answer is, well, maybe there isn't a short answer. The oil companies are always concerned about straight current, static electricity especially. So when product moves quickly through steel pipes, there's a potential for static charge. So all that has to be grounded. And when our docks are when Marathon docks are constructed, they are done so in such a way that all that piping is grounded. And and vessels too have concerns with current. So you have your many times we would come in the shipyard and for the dry dock, right? And you get the barge up or you get the towing vessel up, and there's all the zincs are gone. And that's okay, but then you'll be talking to the yard workers and they'll say, wow, we replaced those zincs 6 months ago in a dry dock we didn't tell you about. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why are they going through the zinc so quickly? Straight current somewhere in the boat. So definitely we want to be aware of it. There are places where we intentionally put current into the water. And if you've ever transited through Chicago, if you come down through Lake Michigan and go down the Chicago River to the Illinois River and then down the Mississippi, there is a fish barrier there, and you can if you were to fall overboard around Romeoville, Illinois, you would not survive. There is 20,000 volts going through the river there. That is to protect the Mississippi basin, and that's to protect Lake Michigan from the Asian carp. So there are places where those fish barriers are used, and we, as inland water operators, we have to deal with them. They're not preferred. I don't think any mariner wants to deal with that, but you have to outweigh the consequences. If certain fish species were to get into the lake, what would happen? And there's a healthy debate on that, whether they would actually survive. But to kind of summarize, we haven't had, in my 3 years, we haven't had any situations where electricity in the water was a concern or created a hazard. But I can tell you that our engineers do design the equipment very specifically to protect against the electrical threat.
Yeah, it sounds like you commercial guys are way ahead of the yacht clubs and marinas and so forth. It seems like it's a much bigger hazard that they're not really aware of.
Yes, I mean, we did a dock replacement this summer at Mount Vernon, Indiana, which is a floating dock. So it's really, it's a steel, it looks like and acts like a barge. It's a steel barge. It's a floating dock. It floats up and down, but it obviously is made of steel. And so there's a lot of concerns there with current. And I'm not an engineer, but the design team, when we do that kind of thing, spends really 18 months or more on the outside designing the barge and considering all the aspects of static electricity and straight current and intrinsically safe wiring. So I know that intrinsically safe wiring isn't necessarily part of like yacht club docks, but for the oil industry, they do make great efforts to make lighting intrinsically safe, and the person in charge shacks intrinsically safe, and equipment in those shacks to really minimize any kind of spark hazard.
Thank you for that, Dan. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If there's anything, I see one coming in on the chat here. We lived in Findlay, Ohio for 20 years, know a lot about Marathon, now a trawler captain in Chilmark, Mass. Appreciate your time, Dan, as well as the host for these meetings. Thank you very much for that input. Any final questions before we sign off here this evening? And do remember this presentation will be archived on our YouTube channel. I believe that's under the Confident Captain moniker, but we will put the link in the next newsletter. You can also just search for it on YouTube. That should be live by tomorrow. And I'll give it one more shot if there's anyone who has another question before we sign off here. All right, Dan, you've done it. You answered everything.
I answered all the questions. That's great.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for your time. Thank you all for supporting the Professional Captains Association. Really appreciate it. It's been a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you in January for the next one. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.